Welcome to Today I Work On, and this is a video I've been wanting to do for a while. What is more fun to drive? The 2019 Alfa Romeo 4C or the 2015 original owners, Dodge Viper. Two iconic brands, two iconic cars. Very low production cars. Around 3,000 of the Vipers were made for the 5th gen, and around 2,100 Alfa 4Cs were made in North America. Total across the pond, there's a little bit more, but they're both super rare cars. Not many people own both. I do. I bought them because they're fun to drive, but after owning the 4C for a year and getting comfortable with it and owning the Viper for a long time, I want to feel out what is more fun to drive. They're both totally different cars. They're both FCA cars. They both have a cult following. So let's stop talking, let's pull the cars out, and let's get into the major specifics of the cars, and then we'll go for a drive. How you get into the Viper? Just pull the handle down. Be very careful. And let's get into the cockpit. This is what we see. It's a very short window. When I first bought this car, it was very intimidating. I'll never forget the first day we bought it home. Let's start it up. It's a very comfy environment in the driver's seat, especially for the stock seats. They say the SRT seat, which I have, is more comfortable. Let's start her up. That V10 is just, you feel that instant torque. The clutch is nice and heavy. It's probably one of the heaviest clutches that I've ever experienced. The suspension on this car, it's stock suspension, stock Bilsteins, very stiff. We're gonna get on the main road, we're gonna give it a rip. And you can't give it a rip because it's so powerful. I have really, really old tires on this car. They're 4 or 5 years old. They're the Pirelli Corsa P0s, which are made for the Viper and for the specific type of rim, stock rim. But the car still handles like it's on rails. Like it just wants to point and shoot. I kind of compare the S2000 and the Viper in very similar aspects. If you have traction control on, yeah, you could kind of kick out the rear a little bit, but it's not like the car's gonna kill you. And this is the Gen 5. Previous gens, like a nice braking zone, and then if I turn in a little bit, there's a lot of confidence in this car. So I do have track brakes on the car, so they do bite really well. When you look out at the hood, it has such a presence. You can see this is the 6-hole hood. It just looks amazing looking out. I have a little bit of traffic in front of me right now, and this car does not like to be driven slowly. A month back, we were in traffic, and the clutch and the transmission hated its life. It did not, the car was jumping and just jittery and didn't want to get into gear. I tried to put it into second, I tried to coast, I tried to be into neutral, and it just wasn't really happy, put it like that. This car needs to be on open roads, obviously, because everything on this car is big. With the V10, just everything underneath this car is also massive. So I actually need to do an oil change on the car. We're gonna do that in the next episode on the Viper. Let's talk about the steering wheel. The steering wheel is massive, but the steering wheel on the Viper feels absolutely amazing. I 100% prefer the Viper steering wheel over the 4C steering wheel. The Viper also doesn't have manual steering, so the steering is kind of light. Makes the car easier to drive. Does that mean it's more fun to drive? You'll find out. But steering inputs are definitely different. This car has effortless steering inputs. And again, even with the stock setup, the Viper, when they did it stock, is very understeery. The car doesn't want to stick. There's so much power in this car. Does that make it more fun to drive? Also, creature comforts. The car has everything that you want. The interior is definitely nicer than the 4C's interior, but I didn't buy the 4C for an interior. When people knock the 4C's interior, I ask them one question. What do you think of the Ferrari F40's interior? And then people get super quiet. Some cars are not supposed to be fancy on the inside. You're just supposed to drive them. The 4C does accomplish that. I don't want to talk about track much, but I mentioned in my 4C video, it was at the track, that it's like a Vegas 10 that's impossible to handle. The Viper, believe it or not, it's a Vegas 10. You want to take her out to dinner. She's more manageable, 100%. Hard to believe, right? But the car is more manageable. That dude, that big Porsche guy, he took a Magnuson, I think. He took a Viper for a drive recently in the past year, and he couldn't believe, a Gen 5, and he couldn't believe how well it handled. And he's a Porsche guy, you know, he just sits in the car and the car does all the work. The Viper doesn't do the work for you, but it's very capable. Gotta love those brakes. It's a very capable platform, and it's light. It's a pretty light car for its size. It's actually not super big. The 4C is definitely smaller than the Viper. We're gonna head back to the house, and then we'll hop into 4C, and then we'll take that for a rip. Getting into the 4C, people complain about getting in and out of this car, but I don't really see a big deal getting in and out of the car. I mean, the pillar is wide, but listen, it's carbon fiber. I don't mind stepping over a whole bunch of carbon fiber. If you do, then this is not the car for you. The 4C, the interior is not horrible, it's just bare bones. So let's start it up and then let's go for a drive. The exhaust on this little 4-cylinder, it's amazing. You saw I did the MagnaFlow exhaust. So far it hasn't cracked, so it's definitely louder in here, way louder than the Viper, because again, bare bones. Seating position feels great. I have way more windshield to work with, so I don't feel so cramped in the car. The tack and the speedo is perfect. It reminds me of the S2000 a little bit. Steering right now is super light for a manual steering, super light. So right now I have it in auto. I'll put it into manual, and I'm gonna put it into D, which is dynamic mode. There's a DNA system on here. I mean, this thing it's like a bat out of hell. That torque just comes when the turbo spools up. It's a completely different feeling car. This is my first true dual clutch auto car. Never had an auto sports car before. 3000 GT back in the late 90s. We don't count that one though. But the car on the street, the steering is so light. One complaint I do have with the 4C is the steering wheel. I feel like the steering wheel it doesn't feel good in my hands. I would really like to swap out the steering wheel or do something about it. It's just not comfortable. The more I drive it, the more I don't feel comfortable with the steering wheel. I feel like Alfa could have done a better job there. So that is a big complaint that I have. But for fun, do you hear that? And the car for side roads, it sticks, man. Yeah, I do have the upgraded rims, the Pilot Sport 4s, which are a great tire on here. It does make a big difference, but this car is it's just a hoot. It's just a hoot to drive. So, I mean, you hear that? I can't do that in the Viper because the Viper's gearing is so tall that you can't do those things when you're driving down a back road, which is, you know, it's a huge plus with the 4C. You know what's also great about the 4C? The gas mileage. You saw my 900 mile trip video. The gas mileage is great. It gets like almost 40 miles to the gallon on the highway. So it's like a perfect little cruiser. You know what's a big difference with the 4C? The Viper actually has room for golf clubs. The 4C does not. So if you want to go out to golfing with your buddies, you're going to have to fit the 4C golf clubs in the passenger seat. The Viper, if you want to take it for a weekend, it's way more comfortable in that aspect. So, but the car just turns. It just feels so good. And the turbo spool. You know, there's a lot of people that complain that the 4C is not a manual. And let me explain to all those people why the 4C is not a manual. It's because we have a 6,000 RPM, like, screaming turbo that spools up so quickly. A manual would never work on this car. Never, ever. Alfa did the right job putting the dual dry clutch in this car. It makes complete sense if you understood the car more. You can never get tired of that. You know what's the other awesome feeling in the 4C? You could feel the lightness. Like, I could feel that minus almost 1,000 pounds in the car. And there's a lot of people that try to compare the 4C to a lot of Lotuses. Or they call it a $70,000 Miata. No, you can't compare this car to a Miata. There's no way. You drive a Miata on track, it doesn't give you a hard time. It wants to work with you. The 4C, on the other hand, it makes you work for every single turn. Speaking of turns. Now, let's talk about a negative. I'm trying to turn, and the manual steering is tough to deal with. But that's okay. Ugh. It's all right, let's go. Like, that's a lot of fun. Hearing the engine in the back, doing all these whistles and bangs and sucking and all the magic that it does, you can never get sick of that. It's a really tough decision. Which car is more fun? We're gonna get back to the house and I'm gonna sit down for a minute and I'm gonna make my decision. Let's go over the keys real fast because it really kind of gives the character of each car. This is the 4C key and it's just a regular key. The Viper, we've owned it for almost 8 years, so it is getting a little frayed on the back. It's just a fob. So just wanted to show you that. It's the next day. I actually finished this video. I watched the ending and I didn't like it because I feel like I didn't come across as well as I wanted to. So I made a list right here. And what's more fun to drive? The 4C is more fun to drive. I know. Why is the 4C more fun to drive? And that's why I made my list. And the one point I really wanted to come across, which you need to drive both to understand, is that the Viper is less manageable on the street than the 4C. If you watch the video, when I first took the Viper out, and you can't give it a rip. You can't gun the Viper. You can't rip it. You try to rip the Viper, you're gonna end up in a tree. Doesn't matter, traction control, brand new tires. The car just has 600 foot-pounds of torque, and it's kind of light for its size, and you're just gonna lose control. That creates a lot of anxiety with the Viper. The 4C doesn't have that problem. Even with the stage 1 tune, which is not crazy, it's 40 extra horsepower, I could redline the car from first to second with no problem. If I went to second gear in the Viper, I'm almost doing 90 miles an hour. So there's no real fun on ripping with the Viper, which kind of takes away from it being more fun. Also, the auto on the 4C is smoother. I also mentioned in the video when we took the Viper and we hit a ton of traffic a month ago, it was brutal. Not only for me, but for the car. The Viper, it hated it. The transmission was struggling so much with the stop and go traffic because, again, V10, everything is huge on the car. 4C, it's thrown into auto, you're in traffic, you don't give a care in the world. It's way easier to deal with. Remember, this video is what's more fun on the roads. If we're talking about the track, I have a different outcome. We could talk about the track if you want in another video, but let's get into number 3, which is actually a negative on the 4C. but it still doesn't tip me over, is the room. The Viper's huge in the spec. You have the whole back, you could fit whatever you want, luggage, you could fit golf clubs. The 4C has no room. You have this little tiny trunk right here, and that's it. If you want to go golfing, you got to throw your clubs in the passenger side. You can't even bring a passenger. But that doesn't make it less fun. It's just less convenience. Another aspect, the sounds. Did you hear the sound clip on the exhaust? The 4C's exhaust is just magical. I don't understand how this little 4 turbo can sound so good, but it sounds so good. Then you have the sounds of the turbo and everything else that goes about it. The Viper is just, it sounds great, but it does not sound like a 4C. The last big reason why I tipped towards the 4C was there's less anxiety with the 4C. If I get into a little fender bender up front, I can replace those parts. They're not cheap, but we're not totaling out the 4C. If we get a little fender bender on the Viper, we're totaling the car. That, you can't even get that 6 vented hood right now. There's no parts for the Viper. Even though they just ended production less than 5 years ago, you can't get parts. So the anxiety level's through the roof when I drive that car. It's another reason why I won't take it to the track, because last year was the last time I really took it to the track. I do want to hit VIR once with it, maybe next year, but the anxiety is just so big when it comes to the Viper and driving it right now. It's not a cheap car. They're both not cheap cars, but if parts were more available, I would feel differently. So that's it on this video. If I want to hear what you have to say, because the 4C is an unknown. People just think, oh, it's Alfa Romeo, oh, it's unreliable. Believe it or not, the car's super reliable. There's not much info about it. People just take the car out for like 5 minutes and then they give it back to whoever owns it. I've owned it for over a year now, and I'm really getting comfortable with the car, and it's not much going on here. You have an engine, a turbo, a transmission, that's it. There's not much electronics in the car to break. It has an Alpine stereo. So what are we breaking kind of a deal? So that's it. If you like this video, please like it. If you like these What's More Fun videos, please subscribe. I want to hear your comments. So again, thanks for watching. If you have a car that you think is more fun than one of these two, hit me up, send me an email, and we could do a comparison on them, and then we could talk about which one we think is more fun. I think that'd be a really cool thing to do. So take care.